Perfect. All right. So this is the last one covering chapter 10, all the way through to the end of the book.
Last chapter book meeting we still have to do. Well, the final meeting, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Let me get my notes pulled up here. If you want to start up with chapter 10.
Yeah, chapter 10. So it's called Marvel and Massive Risks That Make Perfect Sense. I'm trying to get to the beginning of the chapter too, so that way make sure I hit, because it's got the whole bold and all the pages, make sure you hit the points, right?
He kind of starts talking about Pixar acquisition, and then works into the way that they came into the Marvel.
It basically the entire chapter is covering the Marvel acquisition, and it talks about how they're getting Lucasfilms also. It goes in more in depth into that in the next chapter, but overall it's covering the whole Marvel industry accusation overall. Nothing too crazy. I mean, you just kind of see how the how the deals kind of go down. He talks about how there is the risk, right? And you kind of learn from a business sense, right? Overall, you have to take risks in order to get further on with your company, which is why he's saying risks that make perfect sense, right? You just got to make sure they're calculated. That's the main takeaway from this stuff in this chapter.
Talking about is like meeting with Ike, who was the kind of the innovator of Marvel. It was interesting to read how he was kind of a laid back guy. I mean, he's a normal person, goes to Costco with his wife on the weekends, and so it makes you think that not every one of these big deals is going to be between businessman and businessman and so formal. Like they just went out and had brunch and made a $4 billion deal. So
yeah, which I mean, like we talked about obviously in the last two meetings. I mean, that it's kind of crazy how they make such big deals over such a casual affair and whatnot. And you kind of think of these CEOs, right, as these giant figures and whatnot, but really they're just like you and me. They just got to the top of the chain.
Yep. One quote I noted, or one part of the chapter I noted here from the chapter 10 was how he noted that firing people or taking away responsibilities from employees is one of the most difficult things you have to do as a boss, which you wouldn't think is that difficult. You think you're making these big deals, so it would be the harder part, but knowing that it's affecting the person's personal life and having to deal with letting someone go that might not be fitting well with the company is definitely a hard challenge for the big boss.
I feel like a lot of it comes down to what your attitude about it is, right? Because I mean, like I'm sure some people are like, oh hey, we're making big money moves, you know what I mean? And they're like, okay, some people are gonna lose their job, is what it is. But I mean, if you're a genuine person, right? Which I mean, surprisingly, you look at this and you get that perspective that these big like CEOs and whatnot and owners, that they are these down to earth people. So like these deals where it makes people lose their jobs, it actually hurts them, personally on a personal level, rather than just having the business sense. Okay, we got to let people go. It kind of sucks. We're going to lose employees, whatever.
Right.
But yeah. Cool. Moving on to chapter 11, Star Wars. Right. I mean, that's probably the thing that excites you and me the most. It's just Star Wars.
That's a good read for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you see at the beginning of it. I mean, there's one thing I've noticed throughout the books too, is he kind of recaps the last chapter as he's going into the next one a little bit. So he goes in talking about Marvel still, but you see how it goes on with the rest of it, and he starts, he starts making it. Sorry, he starts connecting the dots on how these timelines merge together, versus just jumping. Oh, Marvel. Oh, Star Wars. Oh, Pixar.
Yeah, it was interesting to see like how that initiation started of wanting to acquire Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of got the backstory of why that intention was in his mind and why he thought it would be a good idea, and the background of him working with George Lucas as because he was still the creator of Star Wars. It was obviously his ordeal and his like child almost. So working around the emotional side of that business deal was something that had to have been challenging for him for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you see it too. I mean, it's kind of cool to see like, oh, you see the quote in there, right? They're like, we saved two companies, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you did. I mean, they're like Marvel comics, right? Comics are going, down the drain. I mean, not everybody's reading them all the time. I mean, it's very much more a niche group now.
Yep.
But the whole Marvel's universe that they've created is just absolutely amazing. Sorry, I know the chapter is called Star Wars, but it still covers a little bit of the Marvel. But yeah, Star Wars, and then yeah, the whole deal of how it goes down is absolutely interesting, and it's good that they're able to like save these companies and prolong the life and whatnot of it. Because I mean, it's great stuff that people necessarily don't want to die out, but it's not hitting that niche anymore of people that need it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard for that one creator to continue with the series when you kind of run out of ideas sometimes. I mean,
absolutely.
Burnout happens. So
yeah. Absolutely.
What else did they talk about? It was cool that when he was talking to George Lucas about how he quoted, "If I decide to sell, there isn't anyone I would rather sell to but you." Knowing that George had that passion, knowing that George had like the know-abouts of how Robert was the smartest man to take over that, and George agreed to him being like the predecessor to his, was probably a big like ego boost for Rob, because he knew Star Wars was coming to him eventually, even though the time might not be soon.
Yeah. Another thing I think to note, just in terms of like the business dealings, right? One of the things you see him talk about, George Lucas that is, talks about, is how the Pixar deal was essentially one of the quotes in the book actually is, "I want the Pixar deal."
Right.
So essentially, I mean, you're looking at it, and you're looking at past moves, right, that have built this reputation for you now, that are actually paying off now in the future, just because now you're showing that you're reliable and that you can do this versus them taking a risk on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in the end, they ended up going with around the price of the Marvel deal, right?
Yeah. I think that's what it's like.
Yeah, ultimately, Kevin and I decided we would afford 4.05 billion, slightly above what we paid for Marvel.
Yeah.
And George Lucas immediately agreed. So it's kind of funny that they added that 0.05 billion, which doesn't ever make a difference when you're talking about that much money. But I think it's kind of the principle of the thing for George, that he wanted to have that little extra over Marvel.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, it is definitely it's definitely a cool thing to see. Yeah, I mean, a little ego thing for him, I'm sure. But yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot of money, man.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
Yeah. To be fair though, I mean, you look at it right now, I mean, you look at Marvel and what it's now become, I mean, it's probably worth a lot more than what it is now.
Well, they put a lot of work into it, and
they did, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they in that chapter was how much effort they had to throw in, but it ended up being a good play in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, in theory now, if they wanted to go sell the rights to Marvel, right? I mean, they make bank on it. They make more than what it was worth. Yeah, absolutely. Lucasfilms maybe not as much, I mean,
yeah, they
the
haven't really
and stuff. The movies just haven't hit the same way, if that makes any sense. And I mean, it feels like, at least for me, it feels like I'm getting like a little bit more of a watered down product than I was before.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the whole Star Wars chapter, I really enjoyed reading, because it's just about the personal relationship that he made between all the gentlemen that were dealing with the business aspect. So
yeah, absolutely.
Along with the whole book. So
yeah. So if you look at chapter 12, it's "If you don't innovate, you die." I'm just gonna say it, like off the bat, like that's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, adapt or die. I mean, you're gonna have to adapt. I mean, that's what Marvel had to sell. That's why Lucasfilm had to sell, right? Maybe less so with Lucasfilm, but that's for sure is why Marvel had to sell.
I mean, that's most of the Marvel thing. I mean, they ran out of ideas, but Disney kind of had that background, and they knew that they could revamp it. So his quote there, "If you don't innovate, you die," the title of the chapter definitely is proven.
Yeah, absolutely.
He kind of puts that throughout the whole book, honestly. I mean, even in the introductory chapters, talking about BBC is, "If you don't innovate, you die."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, not that. I mean, they now refer to what the big three accusation, right? Those is Pixar, Marvel, and uh, Lucasfilm.
Yep.
Which I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't really argue with that, right?
I mean, those three of the biggest names they've created out of themselves. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
So in this chapter, they kind of talked about other acquisitions they could get, working on maybe like branching out of just the film industry
yeah,
towards Twitter and Spotify and stuff like that. Um, like we said, I mean, they gotta keep going. So then they acquired BAMTech, which was the baseball team or
yeah,
baseball film, right?
yeah, baseball film, yeah,
And that seemed to pay off because now they got ESPN and everything. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the ESPN thing's another. I mean, it's another big thing. You can just go down like the list of all. I mean, I've talked about it in the last couple ones. I mean, ESPN, like any sports fan knows ESPN, and anybody's into sports. I mean, they are, I guess, the end all be all, right, in terms of
yeah, that's
sports. I
it.
mean, now you're hitting this other niche market rather than just your movies and television and cartoons, whatnot. So I mean, getting into sports, and I mean now, I mean, you look at some of this, they don't like ESPN, right? You go, oh yeah, they'd air some of the popular sports, and a lot of it's just the news channel versus you can see like all the other sports shows on Fox and whatnot if you want to, honestly. But with the acquisition of ESPN Plus, I mean, how often did you see soccer on ESPN? How often did you see? I mean, baseball is not even wasn't even the main thing on there, but they air baseball all the time. Hockey's aired all the time on there. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, and I'm like for soccer, it's not just like MLS, right? It's stuff all over the world. There's Bundesliga, there's Premier League that the Peacock or NBC owns that, but there's the Italian league that they have all kinds of leagues out there that are actually airing on there. I mean, so people that are actually really deep into soccer can actually watch.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't even know that part. I mean, by adding that ESPN Plus, and then he also talked about in this chapter Disney Plus, which is a totally new service that I'm sure Walt Disney never even had dreamed of, but just creating these new horizons for Disney.
Mhm.
That's what this whole chapter is about. And
Yeah,
so, he
absolutely. I
said,
mean, and but they also got the sorry another thing they got the streaming rights to USC, so
yep,
that's another thing now too.
crazy, man. It's amazing how much they actually own it once you dive down into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they even talk to people from General Motors and all that. I mean, it just yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, I think that was in the next chapter, No Price on Integrity, where they were talking about meeting with the presidents and meeting with other people that are high up in the business world, GM,
yeah,
Amazon, Google. And they're definitely in probably one of the top 20 companies in the United States at least. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, and I mean, it's not even just those. I mean, they're Disney now. They kind of get this rap for the monopoly. They're becoming a monopoly on
yeah,
everything. But I mean, you still see businesses like Fox, right? They want Fox, but Fox isn't owned by Disney, right? If I'm not mistaken, I feel like I read that.
I don't think
I
so.
don't think Fox is owned. I know that they have a whole page here that I'm actually looking at right now. Talks about the Fox News and all that. I think it was the main thing they were looking into it was because of the whole
Oh
Donald
yeah,
Trump victory and all that, right?
yeah, possibly buying Fox.
Yeah, I think that was kind of a there's too many what's the word
Too many regulations, honestly.
well, there's regulations, but there's also the whole idea of people have these certain type of views and people there's too much backlash. That's what it is
I
about.
mean, yeah, and then you step into the political side of this whole book and this chapter, and like the tweet that Donald Trump had against Robert, and having meetings with Obama and meetings with different presidents. I mean, it's amazing how intertwined politics are into these big businesses. And I guess that's what happens with anything that has a high value, high monetary value. You're going to have government intervene. But
Yeah.
the chapter's talking about everything he had involving politics is crazy to me.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, because you think about these businesses, like you think Disney, you don't think politics, right? You think like
Not at
fun
all.
cartoons, whatever, fun
Yeah.
cartoons, Disney Channel, Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, Zach and
Mickey
Cody,
Mouse. I mean,
that kind
Mickey
of
Mouse
stuff.
isn't political. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, it's just kind of crazy. Like it makes you think also like if Disney's entwined in this, right? Like what other large scale businesses are having to deal with the same thing. Like obviously there's businesses, there's regulations. I mean, you see Tesla move to Nevada now, they're out of California, that kind of deal. Um, but I mean, you never think about them like interacting with the presidents, you know what I mean, of the United States, not just saying, hey, this is the regulations. Oh yeah, we don't like this, remote for it, or so we're going to take our business move. You know what I mean? But you don't think about them having to actually, that top level, that top tier of the president of the United States, which is crazy.
Yep. All right. Is that the last chapter? I don't know. There's a value about core values and some of his like main quotes and lessons to lead by.
Yeah.
It's basically just a refinery of the book and
Yeah.
talks about how his great options and all the things that he's done.
Yeah.
There wasn't necessarily like examples in there, but
No, it's kind of just what he values when he's looking into business, right? I mean, and who he wants to deal with. Obviously, he talks about the disruptors and everything like that, and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that we're learning in our business classes, right? Um, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's basically just main key takeaways from his experiences. So
yeah, and I mean, yeah, you see the last chapter, like he's talking about, hey, you got to have integrity. That's what they care about, and then
Yep.
yeah, core values and whatnot. Yeah, absolutely.
but overall, pretty incredible book. I definitely enjoyed it. It was an interesting experience to learn about for sure.
Yeah, I don't like reading, but I mean, this book was enjoyable. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely.
mean, it's definitely cool to get some insight,
Yeah, it was
versus
nice to
just
learn about something that we kind of can both be familiar with, or I mean,
Mhm.
any can be familiar with instead of
Yeah,
random. So
yeah, and it's nice that it was Disney, right? Not just like some random company that like say I have no interest in or whatnot.
yeah,
It was nice
exactly.
that it's Disney that everyone kind of has an interest in. So you kind of see, I mean, obviously Disney started out, I mean, they blew up obviously, and then by the time he's taken over, but they were in such a tough spot already. And it's nice to see how kind of the process of how they grew out of that and kind of became what they are now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So you want to go through the questions?
Yeah, let's move into the questions. First one here. What were some of your favorite quotes or passages from the chapter, and why do these quotes stand out to you? What made them memorable or interesting?
Um,
I don't know if you had any. I had a couple
at least for me,
bookmarked.
it's not necessarily like a quote where he's being super. It's not even a quote from him, right? And it's not even a quote where they're being super philosophical, but it's the one where George Lucas was like, "I want the Pixar deal," and it's just the whole having the reputation of it is having a track record is something that can help you versus saying just showing people this is what we have, this is what we have, this is what we can do for you, this is what we can do for you, and then but it's like, hey, look at what we can do for you, look how we helped them out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I think I have two quotes here. One of them being, in any negotiation, be clear about where you stand from the beginning. There's no short term gain that's worth the long term erosion of trust that occurs when you go back on the expectation you created early on. So, like he explained, in every business deal he had, he would sit down and he would just stay straight up. This is what we want. This is what we're going to do with the company. There was no shying away from anything. There was no hiding the truth. One of the chapters was all about integrity, and I think that just shows so important in any of these dealings that he's dealing with. And so it's a lesson for us to take with us throughout the business aspect of anything we do is be really clear about what is going on.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, that just kind of reiterates. I mean, that's like the number one thing you ask anybody who you go into business with, especially anybody who's been burned, right?
Right.
Is they always say, make sure the person that you go into business, make sure you know the people that you go into business with, right? Make sure you trust them. Make sure they actually are trustworthy, because you don't want to get burnt for less lack of a better word.
Absolutely. And then I had one more here. Just a kind of a personal quote from him. You have to approach your work and life with a sense of genuine humility. The success I've enjoyed has been due to, in part, my own efforts, but also due to so much more beyond me. The efforts and support of examples of so many people and twists of fate beyond my control. And like he talks about in the end of the book, he gives acknowledgments to hundreds of people that have helped him along his way. And he's kind of very humble and knowing that this all wasn't created by himself. Obviously, he
Mhm.
put in hard work, but knowing and acknowledging the people that are there around you and the people that are helping you succeed is something important for sure to
Yeah.
take in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you even see with the whole CEO, I mean, him getting the promotion as a CEO or whatnot, right? I mean, you see that he has they're talking about getting people in your corner, and without having the people in his corner, like nobody's going to push for him or whatnot. Nobody's
Mhm.
going to be able to, be on his side. Okay. The next question is, what new things did you learn from these chapters? Which was the most memorable?
Just learning about the negotiations that he did with Marvel. I had no idea that Disney even had Marvel. I'm not very well versed in any of the superhero Marvel side of things. So learning about that chapter was informative to me. And then I also didn't really know about the whole sports sector until I had started reading this book. And when he explained more about acquiring ESPN and the BAM, it's pretty interesting to know how diversified they've created Disney these days.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it was the whole I found it super interesting the whole backstory about not backstory I should say, but like talking to the you're talking to the president, you know what I mean? And you're having conversations with, Donald Trump, you're having conversations with Barack Obama. You're having I mean, such these I mean, they're the person, right? For the country. And it's just kind of and the whole just how that all tied in with the whole Fox deal or yeah, Fox deal, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How their negotiations with Fox went. I mean, I take that back. I think Disney does have some part in Fox. I don't know if they own Fox or they just have a partnership with them. I don't know
Yeah,
if that
that's
makes any
definitely
sense.
part of one of our questions. I think that's the next question that we have is what questions do we have? So I wish you went into more detail about that whole Fox deal.
Yeah. I wish you did go in a little bit more detail about, I mean, what, because I know that Disney owns certain companies that air on Fox, if that makes any sense.
It does.
But I don't know if they own Fox themselves or if they only own like, say, Fox Sports versus like having Fox News, Fox Business, if that makes sense too. But yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Disney Television Services. It'd be interesting to learn more about the acquisition with Fox, but he's talked about so many different buyouts. It's kind of hard. It might even have been before this book was released. They finalized any of the dealings. So
Yeah. I mean, it's the very end of the book they talk about it, right? I mean,
yeah.
so yeah, that's something that yeah. So the questions, yeah, absolutely. That would be my question is like I don't know if they finalized the Fox deal, if the Fox deal was like, hey, we own Fox now or
Right.
whatnot. But yeah,
Um,
I wish there's a little more detail about that.
yeah. So what questions? One of the other questions that I had about the book is how I wish you went into detail about having companies like overseas or having companies in California, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
Tesla's moving to Nevada. Like, what does Disneyland in California have to do differently than Disney World or Disney Shanghai or Disney London, wherever these other like major parts of Disney are? It would have been nice. Maybe he didn't really deal with it, I guess, being such a high up executive, but
Well, I'm sure he had to, right? I
yeah,
mean,
a little more
yeah.
insight on what is going on in different regions and like different laws that you have to abide by in say California
Hmm.
versus Florida versus anywhere else in the world. I wish you went into more detail about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be that'd be something to be cool to go deeper in. I mean, like this is the regulations and everything, but there's not. I mean, like I would say the pandemic, right, and COVID, like that'd be
Yeah.
cool because Florida handles it so much different than California,
Right.
and yeah, I mean it'd be cool to see how they had to deal with the differences and like especially in like the governors and whatnot and how they're handling it.
Hmm.
That would have been a cool concept to see, but
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you mentioned the pandemic because I went to Disneyland right like in the middle of the pandemic in like
mhm.
January of last year, and in Florida, and I had never experienced the California one before. So
Yeah, I mean I was in California, or the California one a couple weeks ago now, 2 3 weeks ago now, and it was yeah, I mean they're if you're outside you don't need a mask or anything. If you're inside you have to wear a mask. um that was essentially it, nothing too crazy. I mean it wasn't like hey it's down like shove it down your throat. It's pretty much like how it is in Nevada. If you're inside you have to wear it. If you're outside you're good.
mhm.
um Yeah, that's how I'd compare it. From what I've heard, Disney World's like that, but I mean, you could probably speak to that more so than I could. But
Yeah, when I went there, it was no care of anything basically, but
no
that
care
was
of anything.
Florida. So I
Yeah,
mean, that's kind of why I would have liked him to have gone into more detail about different areas and different aspects of how you have to handle companies. So
yeah, that would have been cool. What do you think about the author's research? Was it clear where the author got his or her credible sources? Well, I mean, we can just breeze through this one. Him
yeah,
again. We'll say it in the last two. Say it again. Um,
yeah. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's a
yeah,
memoir of his own experiences. So
yeah. It was nice that he took the quotes straight from George Lucas and threw it in there. That kind of stuff. That was cool. But yeah, I mean,
and Ike
99% of
too.
it's him talking in his perspective. So I mean, it
Yeah,
is his perspective, I should say. But yeah,
the conversations with Ike, how he talked about just their personal life and what Ike brought to the table as his own
hmm
being is a great way to bring that extra voice into the book.
yeah, absolutely. What do you think of author's research? Okay. Do the issues discussed in the chapters affect your life? How so? Do they affect you directly or indirectly? Do they affect your day-to-day life now or in the future? Um,
I think they affect us. I mean, everyone knows what Disney is, like we talked
yeah,
about. And so I mean, even with sports, like you said, they added UFC, I think.
yeah, they
Like
have UFC. Yeah,
every single day, pretty much probably Disney's adding new things, and every time that happens, every acquisition that they do under the table is going to be something different that we don't even know about, but now we know that Disney owns and Disney's controlling. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, what else? What else is there to say? I mean, my day-to-day, maybe not. In the future, maybe. I mean, maybe they'll buy something I'm like super invested in or something like that, and
there we go.
there you go. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe they'll buy Lionsgate one day or something like that. It'd be nice.
Yep. And then there'll be the monopoly that no one can take down.
Absolutely. Um,
What
did
else?
reading the chapters evoke any feelings? What kind of feelings? Why those feelings?
I mean, the great ending of the book, it was nice to read these final chapters and get closure on his experiences working for them for so long. So I think it evoked some feeling of success, at least for me reading it. It just kind of made me proud of him to know how successful he's been, all the work he's put in. It was just an amazing experience to learn about and makes me strive to want to do that one day.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to it's nice to see an example set. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, hey, you work. I mean, he went from being the top at ABC. You know what I mean? To now he's a high up, but he's almost another guy at Disney. Has to work his way up from there. Becomes a CEO. Now he's the man, and now he's got to do everything right by the company, and make sure it doesn't tank. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, because ultimately, if it tanks, everything goes to him, right? And
Yeah, which is a
yeah,
major responsibility.
yeah. But it's cool. It's cool to see how he handled it and
And it
whatnot.
was cool to see how he just started off as a normal hometown boy, kind of like you and I, and just went special. He wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't born into any sort of success. So it's amazing to see what he could accomplish and what we could accomplish.
Absolutely. What are the short-term and long-term consequences to the issues raised in the chapters? Um, I don't know if there's any consequences per se. I mean, he bought Disney. I mean, not bought Disney. Sorry, he bought Pixar. Um, he bought Pixar. He bought Marvel. He bought Star Wars. He bought all that. I think Luke's Frozen, which is always fun. Oh, see if he reconnects here.